The house on Maple Drive was too quiet. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed nervous, as if it, too, could feel something was off. Ethan Walker sat at the kitchen table, his untouched coffee cooling beside him. Outside, the California sun was already bleeding through the blinds, bright and golden, but inside the air felt heavy. His wife, Claire, had left for work early again, at least, that's what she said. He stared at her mug sitting in the sink. She never left dishes there. Never. He tried to brush it off. People change, schedules change, but lately, it felt like everything about her had changed. The perfume she wore was different, sweeter and more expensive. The way she checked her phone, tilting the screen away. The faint, distracted smile she'd give him when he asked how her day was. They'd been married for 11 years. Long enough for silence to mean something. Ethan worked as a building inspector for the city of Sacramento. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well enough to keep their mortgage in check and let Claire pursue her career in marketing. She loved her job, loved it so much lately that she'd been staying late almost every night. He picked up his phone and scrolled through her social media. Everything looked normal. Pictures from last weekend's barbecue with friends, selfies with their golden retriever, Charlie, and the occasional, grateful for small moments red heart, caption. But something in her eyes looked different. Distant. That night, when she came home, Ethan noticed another small thing. She smelled faintly of cologne, not his. "Hey," she said, setting her purse on the counter. "Sorry, it's been a crazy day. Traffic was awful." He nodded, pretending to believe it. "You ate already?" "Yeah, grabbed something with the team after work." She kissed his cheek, lightly, almost like a formality, and walked past him to the bedroom. Ethan stood there for a few seconds, his hand frozen around his glass of water, the weight of her absence filling the room even though she was only 10 feet away. He didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning. The small cracks before the collapse. The silence before the storm. The next morning, Ethan woke up to the sound of Claire's blow dryer humming behind the bathroom door. For a brief second, things felt normal again, the small domestic sounds of routine, of two people starting their day together. Then he noticed something else. Her phone was on the nightstand, unlocked. Claire never left it unlocked. He told himself not to look. He really did. But curiosity, that old enemy of trust, pulled him closer. The screen was open to a text thread, a simple gray bubble that said, "Last night was amazing. I can still smell you." His heart stopped. Before he could process what he was seeing, the message disappeared. Deleted. A ghost erased in front of his eyes. He stared at the empty chat window, his mind spinning with a dozen impossible explanations. When Claire stepped out of the bathroom, towel around her hair, she saw the phone in his hand and froze for a fraction of a second, just long enough for him to notice. Then she smiled. Too quickly. "Hey, what are you doing with my phone?" Ethan forced a weak laugh. It was buzzing. Thought it might be something important. "Oh. Work." She took it gently from his hand, her eyes steady but colder now, guarded. "You're sweet." The moment passed, but not for him. All day at work, Ethan couldn't focus. Blueprints blurred before his eyes, voices sounded distant. He kept replaying that text, over and over, trying to remember every word. Last night was amazing. That night, when Claire came home, she was wearing a new dress, black, fitted, elegant. "Client dinner," she said with a quick smile. "Don't wait up. Want me to drive you?" Ethan offered, testing her reaction. She hesitated, just half a second, and shook her head. "No need. We're meeting downtown. I'll Uber." He nodded slowly. "Sure. Have fun." When the door closed, the silence hit him again, heavier this time. He sat there, staring at her wine glass on the counter, the lipstick mark faint against the rim. Charlie, their dog, padded into the room and rested his head on Ethan's knee. The simple loyalty in the animal's eyes made his throat tighten. He grabbed his jacket and keys. If she was going downtown, he told himself, he could just check. Nothing serious. Just to be sure. He followed the Uber app's shared location she'd once sent him months ago, still saved in his phone. It led him to the Copper Room, an upscale restaurant in Midtown Sacramento, warm light spilling through the windows, the kind of place for business dinners, or dates. Through the glass, he saw her. Claire was sitting at a table for two. Laughing. Leaning forward. Her hand brushed the arm of a man across from her, tall, sharply dressed, early 40s. Not someone from her office. Ethan stood there on the sidewalk, hidden in the shadows, heart pounding like a drum. The city buzzed around him, traffic, voices, neon lights, but all he could see was her smile. The same smile she used to give him. He wanted to storm in. Confront her. Demand answers. But he didn't. He turned away and walked to his truck instead, the weight of truth pressing down with every step. By the time he got home, he didn't even turn the lights on. He sat in the dark kitchen, staring at the clock. 10:47 p.m. 11:12, 11:59. When she finally came in, heels clicking softly against the floor, she smelled faintly of wine and perfume, and someone else's cologne. "Hey," she whispered, surprised to find him awake. "You're up." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Couldn't sleep." Neither of them spoke again that night. The next few days unfolded like a play Ethan didn't want to be in. Everything looked the same, the house, the coffee, the quiet mornings, but the air between them had changed. It was thicker now, harder to breathe in. He watched her move around the kitchen one morning, humming softly as she buttered toast. Her hair fell loosely over her shoulders, glowing in the sunlight. She looked beautiful. Almost heartbreakingly so. "How's work?" he asked, his voice steady but his hands shaking slightly as he lifted his mug. She smiled without looking at him. "Busy. We're pitching a new campaign for a big tech client. Long hours, you know how it is." He nodded slowly. "Yeah. Must be exhausting." Claire finally met his gaze, just for a second. "It is. But it's worth it." She kissed him goodbye and left in her usual rush, the scent of her perfume lingering behind. As the front door closed, Ethan whispered under his breath. "Worth what, Claire?" He didn't even recognize his own voice anymore. It sounded tired, older. That evening, he sat on the porch with a beer, staring at the darkening street. Charlie lay beside him, tail still, as if sensing his unease. The neighborhood lights flickered on one by one, families settling in, laughter echoing from nearby houses. All the small signs of normal life he used to take for granted. He picked up his phone. His thumb hovered over her contact photo, Claire smiling in the sunlight, from a trip they'd taken to Lake Tahoe 3 summers ago. They'd been happy then. Or at least he'd thought they were. He opened the messages and typed. "You home soon?" Then deleted it. Half an hour later, he finally texted again. "Need anything from the store?" She didn't reply. At 10:03 p.m., he heard the garage door open. She walked in quietly, trying not to wake him, except he wasn't asleep. He sat on the couch, the TV on mute, her photo on the wall glowing faintly in the blue light. "Hey," she said softly. "Sorry, it ran late again. Client drinks." He didn't answer right away. Then. "Which client?" She blinked. "What? Which client?" His tone was calm, but there was something sharp underneath. She hesitated. Alderson Tech. You know, the one I told you about last week." He nodded slowly, taking a sip of his beer. "Right. The silence stretched between them. Finally, he said. I drove by the copper room the other night. Her breath caught, almost imperceptibly. You what? I thought I'd surprise you, he said, eyes still fixed on the TV. But you were busy. Ethan, she started, but her voice faltered. He turned to her. Who is he? Claire's lips parted, then closed again. For a moment, she seemed small, fragile, caught between guilt and panic. He's just a coworker. We had dinner. That's all. Don't, Ethan said quietly. Don't lie to me. The tears came fast, though they weren't the kind that soften a moment, they were desperate, defensive. It's not what you think, she whispered. It just happened. I didn't plan it. I swear. He stared at her, every muscle in his body trembling with rage and disbelief. How many times? She closed her eyes. Ethan, please. How many? He repeated, louder this time. Her voice was barely audible. 3. That single word shattered something inside him. He stood up, walked to the window, gripping the frame so tightly his knuckles went white. He wanted to break something. To scream. But instead, all that came out was a whisper. I gave you everything, Claire. She began to sob, but he didn't look at her. You should go, he said finally. Tonight. Ethan, please. Go. The word cut through the air like glass. She packed quietly, a few clothes, her laptop, her makeup bag, and left without another word. The moment the door closed, the silence returned. Only this time, it wasn't uneasy. It was absolute. The house didn't sound the same without her. No laughter echoing down the hall. No hair dryer in the morning. No smell of perfume or coffee drifting through the kitchen. Just the ticking of the clock on the wall and the hum of the refrigerator, the lonely heartbeat of an empty home. It had been 8 days since Claire left. Ethan hadn't told anyone. He went to work, came home, fed the dog, and sat in silence until sleep eventually found him. He told his coworkers she was visiting her sister in Oregon. They nodded politely. No one asked questions. On the 9th night, he finally walked into their bedroom, the one he hadn't entered since she left. Her side of the bed was still perfectly made, her pillow untouched. The faint trace of her perfume still lingered in the air, like a ghost that refused to leave. He opened the top drawer of her nightstand. Inside was a folded photo, the two of them on their wedding day. She looked radiant, eyes full of trust. He looked proud, certain. He sank down on the edge of the bed and stared at the picture for a long time. How did we get here? He whispered. Charlie padded into the room and lay down at his feet, tail wagging softly as if trying to comfort him. Ethan smiled weakly and rubbed the dog's head. You're the only one still on my side, huh? He picked up his phone and scrolled through Claire's number. His thumb hovered over the call button. Then he tossed the phone aside. She'd made her choice. Or maybe they both had, without realizing it. Years of routine, missed dinners, long hours, unspoken words, all the quiet ways love erodes until there's nothing left but habit and memory. Still, part of him wanted answers. Not excuses, just truth. The next morning, he drove downtown to her office building. The receptionist looked at him with sympathy when he said her name. Claire. She doesn't work here anymore. He frowned. What? Since when? The woman checked her computer. Last week. She resigned. He walked out into the street, the world suddenly tilting around him. She hadn't just left him, she'd erased everything. Back in his truck, he sat in silence for what felt like hours. People walked past, living their ordinary lives, while his own had collapsed into fragments. That evening, he opened a bottle of whiskey and stared at the blank TV screen. He thought about calling her again. About shouting, crying, begging, anything to feel something other than this hollow ache. Instead, he poured another drink. Around midnight, he went to the garage, opened an old box marked Tahoe, and pulled out the framed photo from their first trip together. They were laughing, wind in their hair, no worries yet. He smashed it against the wall. The sound echoed through the house, sharp and final. Charlie barked once, startled, then went quiet. Ethan sank to the floor, hands trembling, glass scattered around him. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel angry. Just, done. He whispered to the empty air. I don't even know who you are anymore. It was raining the night she came back. Not the soft, cinematic kind of rain, the real one. Cold, relentless, soaking the world in gray. Ethan heard the knock just after midnight. Slow, hesitant. He didn't move at first. He just sat there on the couch, staring at the door, listening to the steady rhythm of the rain hitting the porch roof. Then came her voice, faint, trembling. Ethan, it's me. He opened the door. Claire stood there in the rain, hair plastered to her face, eyes red. She was still wearing the same coat she'd left in. In her hands, nothing. No bags. No excuses. Just the weight of regret. He stepped aside silently. She walked in, dripping water onto the hardwood floor. The house seemed to recognize her, everything suddenly sharper, alive again, but uneasy. They stood there in the living room, neither knowing what to say. The only sound was the rain outside and the faint creak of the ceiling fan. Finally, Ethan spoke. His voice was calm, but too calm, the kind that comes after you've run out of tears. Why are you here? Claire looked at him, her lip trembling. I didn't know where else to go. He nodded once, then gestured toward the couch. Sit. She hesitated, then sat. He stayed standing, arms crossed, watching her. I ended it, she said finally. With him. It's over. Ethan almost laughed. The sound that came out wasn't really laughter, it was something cracked, broken. Over. Claire, you destroyed 11 years. There is no over. She started crying quietly. I made a mistake. He shook his head. No. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying something you don't mean. What you did, that was a choice. Over and over again. She looked down at her hands. I know. He walked toward the window, staring out at the rain. Do you even know why? Why him? She hesitated. Then, in a trembling voice, because he listened. Because he made me feel seen. I didn't mean for it to happen, but one night, it just did. Ethan turned back to her, eyes hollow. And that was enough to throw your marriage away? Claire covered her face with her hands. I don't expect you to forgive me. I wanted you to know I'm sorry. He studied her for a long time. The woman he loved, the woman who had once been his home, now just a stranger with familiar eyes. After a moment, he said quietly. You're right. I don't forgive you. But I believe you're sorry. She looked up, tears streaking her cheeks. What happens now? Ethan sighed. Now. We move on. Separately. She nodded slowly, as if she'd known the answer before asking. I'll have the papers sent next week, he said. You can take what you need from the house tomorrow. I'll stay somewhere else. She stood, her voice barely audible. You really mean it? Yes. He met her gaze one last time. This house doesn't belong to us anymore. It's just a place where something ended. Claire walked toward the door. She paused, looked back once, as if searching for something, maybe a final trace of who they were. But there was nothing left to find. When the door closed, Ethan exhaled, long and unsteady. The rain outside slowed, fading to a drizzle. The silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful. For the first time in weeks, he felt something close to relief. Not happiness. Not yet. But freedom. He walked to the porch, breathing in the cold air, and whispered to himself. You can't lose what's already gone. 6 months later, the house on Maple Drive was no longer his. Ethan had sold it, the walls, the furniture, the memories. Someone else lived there now, probably rearranging rooms, repainting over everything that once belonged to a different life. He rented a small apartment near Folsom Lake. It wasn't fancy, but it was his. Simple. Clean. Quiet. The first few weeks had been hard, waking up alone, cooking for one, the echo of silence following him everywhere. But slowly, the ache had faded, like a bruise losing its color. He got into new routines. Early morning runs. Weekends hiking with Charlie. Late-night fishing trips where he'd just sit on the dock and listen to the water breathe. He didn't check Claire's social media anymore. Didn't wonder where she was or who she might be with. The curiosity had burned itself out long ago, replaced by something calmer, acceptance. Sometimes, he thought about the last night they spoke, her standing in the rain, eyes full of regret. For months, that image haunted him. But now, when it came back, it didn't hurt. It just existed, like a closed book on a shelf. One evening, after work, he stopped at a small cafe near the lake. The barista smiled at him, a quiet, warm kind of smile. Her name tag said Anna. Rough day? She asked. He chuckled softly. Not really. Just long. She handed him his coffee. That's life. It gets long before it gets better. Ethan smiled back. Yeah. I think it's finally getting better. He sat by the window, sipping his drink, watching the sunset reflect off the water. The sky was painted gold and pink, calm and forgiving. Charlie rested at his feet, tail flicking lazily. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt light. Not because he forgot, but because he'd survived remembering. He took a slow breath, letting it all go, the lies, the anger, the questions. Outside, a gentle wind moved through the trees. And for the first time since Claire walked out that door, Ethan Walker smiled. Not the smile of someone who got what he wanted. But of someone who finally made peace with what he didn't. The end.